Equality, diversity and inclusion in digital learning. Increasing accessibility for all users. 20 minutes with Becki Morris of DCN, Disability Collaborative Network, and Matt Dean of Aventido. Who are you and where do you work?
I'm Becki Morris. I am the Director of DCN and Associate Consultant for our cross partnership with Embed. I've worked in heritage for about 25 years in a variety of roles, including front of house, operations and collections management. When I founded DCN in 2015, one of the first things that we looked into is the whole situation with heritage. Is there other things that we could be using to ensure that the workforce can be our authentic selves, that we can be intersectionally inclusive? Was there anything we were missing out on? And the key thing was that we spoke to other sectors in regards to this. And that included all sorts of people in terms of the Change in Places guys, right through to all kinds of organisations in respect to intersectional inclusive practice. This has now led on to a partnership with Embed, which I'm really excited about, which is a consortium in how we can support heritage in becoming sustainable, inclusive, but also as a constructive critical friend. We work across all sectors, but the DCN and Embed partnership specifically focuses on heritage. So this is kind of where we are with everything. We've also been supporting the sector in respect to the reopening recommendations support service that was launched during lockdown, which was circulated by DCMS. We've also been working with the Heritage Alliance for rebuilding heritage for the inclusive workplace and inclusive workforce tools. We've also been supporting a lot of you on your inclusion journey, which has been absolutely fantastic. So that's literally where we are. I'm also neurodivergent. I'm dyspraxic dyslexic.
My name is Matt Dean. I am co-owner and COO of a company called Aventido. So Aventido is a PR, marketing and software distribution company. And we specialise in assistive technology. So myself and my business partner, Anthony Ruck, have been in assistive technology for over 20 years now. So we've seen the rise of various different technologies, and we've seen how that can benefit everybody from those in education. We work a lot with the Disabled Students Allowance, all the way through to workplace, access to work, and also now with the partnership that we have with Embed, where we work with them and the likes of Becki to work with them and their clients on how assistive technology can help individuals not only within the workplace but also for a lot of people on those visiting their websites, looking at their content that they're creating and how they can actually use the technology to reach a wider audience. I'm also a council member and former director of the British Assistive Technology Association, and Anthony actually is also co-president of DAT Europe, which is the European Assistive Technology Organisation. So what we sort of joined the partnership with Embed to do was to really work with a group of very like-minded individuals in terms of inclusion and how we can bring, I guess, the technology arm into the offering and how we can work with people to empower users and stuff to really gain the best from it. And that's really what we see our role is. We like to almost view ourselves as providing people with a toolbox, if you will, and within that toolbox is lots of great technology that will hopefully enable people to do what they want to. So that's me.
Why did you decide to focus on inclusive practice?
It all started out quite a few years ago in respect to how heritage naturally seems to fall into cases and text. You know, that is our natural sort of how people can sometimes perceive us. And it always gathered an interest that if you can't engage in that particular way, then how do you engage in museums? Do you engage in museums at all? I then left the sector in 2009 and supported adults who had poor educational experiences. And through that, it was due to undiagnosed and neurodivergent profile. So a lot of my guys had literacy difficulties. And the key thing was that they loved history, but they wouldn't go to museums. And it was because they had a fear of being found out, or they would feel that they would be asked a question on a particular information panel, but would have difficulty in engaging with it. So they wouldn't want to answer that key question. So as I went back into the sector, I started to realize that actually there was a few things that maybe we needed to focus on, such as the whole sort of who are our audiences, and are there people that are missing? And if they're missing, why are they missing? Is there something we can do about it? And if there isn't something we can do about it, then is that from us thinking we can't do it? Or is that because there's something that's missing that we need to engage with in order to facilitate and remove those barriers? So as I went back into heritage, I started to see all this stuff. And the thing was, I kept complaining about it to my poor colleagues. I kept saying, it's not right. It's not right. Well, the thing is, I got taught that you shouldn't be using this particular choice of font because it's the difficulty in interpreting it is more difficult. You get more tired. So why are we going back to this stuff? And a colleague of mine took me aside and went, do something about it. And I went, well, no, you have to be sort of big and important in heritage to do something about it. And she went, no, do something about it. And that's how DCN started. And we were introduced and we all got together over coffee and biscuits, as we do, like that. And we slowly said, we will start to do something about this. We'll start with a website of resources to begin with, but we'll start to have those key conversations about what is out there to support us, so our workforce and our audiences can be receive inclusive practice. And some of the key things on that journey have been things like changing the legislation, supporting that change with the Change in Places Consortium, increasing the number of toilets, accessible toilets. But the key cusp in all of this, as a former collections person as well, was, are there other ways of talking about history? And what ways can be done in respect to technology? Because as a former collections person, you know, trying to put down an entire life story in 170 words is an absolute nightmare. So are there easier, quicker, more interpretive, inclusive interpretation in content, representation, but also in technology that can actually open the doors to further conversations and narratives? So all of this was bubbling around in my head. And then literally I was like, right, what can we do about this? So I ended up having conversations, more tea, more coffee, more biscuits with a lady called Sarah Simcoe. And she said, why don't we work together? And I was like, yes, like that. So it's all stemmed from there. And the key thing within this cross-sector partnership has been the opportunities. And that's the key word. It's about opportunities to create more easier ways of working, more smarter ways of working, but also pumping in this knowledge that we may be missing to open the doors to not only further audiences, but also to have a more representational workforce as well.
I guess from my point of view, and mine in particular, having worked in assistive technology for so many years, was I fondly remember going to an event probably 7-8 years ago now, probably a little bit longer maybe actually, where assistive technology was always seen as being a product or technology that an individual had to have on one particular machine, and that's the way that it always was. What we tend to find now, and what we really want to be involved more in it, is that the technologies that we work with don't have to be used by one individual on one particular machine. They can be used by lots of different people. The majority of those products are now cloud-based, so you can access it from any machine, your mobile phone, your tablet, anything that you like that's obviously got an internet connection and a web browser. And suddenly this world of features opens itself up. And that's one of the things that we wanted to do, was to bring this technology, working with, obviously, Becky's mentioned a lady called Sarah Simcoe and Embed, was to work in that partnership to say, look, we've got lots of technology out there, but what we've got within that technology is lots of features. And those features we found are actually really inclusive. So you will find a particular feature of a product that somebody will benefit from, and you'll find another feature that somebody else will benefit from, and so on and so forth, all the way through a piece of software. So for example, text-to-speech software is a prime example where, again, great for individuals or those that potentially dyslexic, or those that maybe have cognitive issues in terms of reading. Great, have that text read back to you. But also with that technology, you can actually put that text into audio format. So you can actually create MP3 files that you might want to listen to. I'm a big podcast fan, so I'll be quite happy with my headphones on, listen to podcasts, but I'm equally can use the technology I'm talking about with assistive technology to put my work into an audio format that I can listen to. Now that makes that content suddenly very inclusive to me, but also can make a lot of the things that we do within the workplace, or for example, Becki says with heritage, can suddenly make that information inclusive to everybody. And that's really why we wanted to get involved and to use that expertise and stuff to make people aware that there is technology out there, but we shouldn't be put off by the word technology and assume that it's complicated or it's difficult or expensive. It's none of those. But what it is very inclusive and does allow people to really maximize what they can do. So that's why we wanted to get involved into terms of making environments as inclusive as possible.
Have you noticed any bad habits appearing with the increase of digital output during the pandemic?
I think there's been some really good stuff. There's been a definite increase of the use of captions and also skills in regards to closed and live captioning, and how important it is to have within conferences and also in terms of discussions, webinars and all that stuff. There's also been more work in respect to audio descriptions, how you would describe yourself in regards to that. I think one of the big habits that was like, no folks, seriously, was how within the pandemic there was a big leaning on digital staff, right? We need to do this, we need to do this. To get content out there during the lockdown in particular, and also that it had to be rushed to get through. So there was a few instances where the captions themselves weren't particularly accurate. Auto-generated captions, really nasty things in terms of accuracy and who is speaking as well. So there's been a lot of stuff sort of happening around that. But one key principle in terms of key lesson learned was three things really. First thing was within heritage, don't rush it. It's better to make something that is of good quality that you can put on your shelf and bring out and say, this is it, and it's inclusive, it's representational, it is accessible, than to rush everything and then do it again later, because in the end you've got enough things to do. The second thing as well, that as we see from post-lockdown, there are going to be people, and there still are people, who will not want to rush back to every single museum, conference, event or exhibition. It's about creating content that is also available online, and about creating that situation for which it is accessible. The third thing is to relate to digital. Any digital work has to have access and inclusion at the heart of it. There's no reason behind that now of why that can't happen. You need to consider that there is legislation in terms of WCAG 2.1 AA and also in terms of the mobile apps application 2018, to make sure that content is inclusive and you're not creating barriers for any audiences that may be not able to access that content. But as we were saying, Matt and I were saying, this is also about opportunity. So this is not sort of wagging the finger at people. This is more about kind of, digital can be a way of reaching out to audiences that may not even consider you as an opportunity to engage with. And that's the key part of the excitement, is part of your toolkit, your resources to create digital content that is accessible and also inclusive. And that inclusion can be anything from other languages to representation to creating community narratives about the interpretation of our heritage as a country, but also in terms of the diversity of those voices and also the history of it as well. So there's so much opportunity in regards to that, but it's better to take it from a planning and strategy point of view than to rush it and say, has anybody got any examples of this? Has anybody got any examples of that? Think about where else to look outside of the sector in regards to that. And also think about sort of who you can engage with, because those people, your website is like, as colleagues of ours say, it's your shop window. So this in itself will attract volunteers, workforce and opportunities that may not have been able to have been opened before, because you've created an inclusive offer. So lots of good stuff there.
Thanks, Becki. That was really comprehensive. Matt, do you want to add anything to that?
I was going to say, I've probably only got a little bit to add. So, yeah, in terms of sort of the pandemic and the things that obviously we've seen and you know, habits and stuff from that, I wouldn't say I've seen any bad habits. What I've seen is a potential to embrace the technology that's available to actually make everything more accessible and inclusive. And Becki and I have had several conversations around this. And one of the things that I've sort of spoken around is QR codes. Now, QR codes is a very interesting one. They have been out for more years than I care to think about, but were never really very mainstream until, I guess, pandemic. And suddenly the ability to use your own personal device by your phone to take, you know, use your camera to look at the QR code to give you information, for a lot of people is a very good and accessible way to do that, and to give them the information in a format that they can then use and access in the best way possible for them. Also, you know, website accessibility. As Becki said, your website is very much your shop window. You know, it's about bringing people in, showing them what you have in terms of, you know, it could be a particular exhibition you've got on, it could be, you know, upcoming event, whatever that might be. But if you want people to go on there, you want people to come along and to attend, then how can you make the information about it as accessible? And there are some great toolbars to be able to add to your site. For example, there's a product by a Dutch company called ReadSpeaker, which is brilliant, and the voices as well. That's the important thing. So the voice clarity and content stuff is really important when it comes to this. It's the fact that it will read the website content back to you. It will let your users gain that information again in a format that's right for them. So I think it's not so much any bad practices. I think what it's shown is there's a lot of opportunity for that technology to come more to the forefront. And actually, I think to a certain extent it's probably helped, and we've seen a lot of great things done by a lot of sites and a lot of organizations in getting that technology involved now.
If I could just add, it's true, because sometimes within heritage, because we know there's a digital deficit within skills, within heritage itself, some organisations come to us and go, is it okay? Like, is it all right? And we offer like audits of websites so then people get a good sort of make that first initial move to see where the lie of the land is in regards to their digital offers. But also that there's some really, because I mean, you know, I remember the times when you had to train Dragon comprehensively to be able to use your own voice. Because I was diagnosed at 23 as being dyslexic, and I'm now over the age of 40. And it's one of those things where nowadays we've got Alexas, we've got podcasts, we've got technology, we've got things like transcription tools that are available online. It's more of a case of sometimes looking at what we've got and say, actually, is there something that could do that? And I think this is where it's so key to have those collaborative conversations, because it not only helps in terms of time, but also in terms of what is out there in respect to that too.
Yeah, and I think if I can just add one more part to what Becky's just said, it's a really valid point, and goes back to, I think, what I said at the start is, you know, some of the technology we were talking about, people associate with things like with Siri, or, you know, by Google, or even down to voice sort of commands that a lot of the car manufacturers use. So there's an association that, oh, that technology must be, you know, extremely expensive and quite high end, but it's actually, and as Becki said, in the case of Dragon, it'll be 25 years of Dragon being in existence, which is voice recognition software. So the technology we're talking about is out there, has been out there for a long time, and is not an expensive solution. In fact, it's now becoming quite mainstream. So people shouldn't be put off by that.
What would be your top tip for others who want to make their digital learning content more accessible?
Plan. Absolutely key. And make sure that access and inclusion are at the heart of that particular plan. And then you'll be okay.
I think my top tip would be, look at the technology, look at what do you need, what is available. One thing that we always say with regards to accessibility, and I'm going to highlight this with websites, is we always say to people, if you're not sure about your website accessibility, disconnect your mouse and try and work your way through your website by just using the tab key, because for some users that's what they have to do. And if you're struggling, then think about potentially how people are also struggling with other parts of your website. So again, accessibility and the technology to help people with that.
Join DLNET, Becki and Matt on Twitter for more insights and opportunities for discussion. May the 6th, 2022, 1 to 2 p.m. GMT. Follow @DLNET or the hashtag DLNETChat to participate.